BioWare is dead, soon to be sold to parts in a fate worse than Ubisoft. Because keep in mind, Ubisoft at least is its own entity. BioWare, on the other hand, the company that has done literally nothing worth value, worth acclaim, or even worth mentioning in the past 15 years of its existence. That's right. Since Mass Effect 2, they have not done anything good. Is now going to have a worse fate than Ubisoft because, well, they are a subsidiary of EA. EA just can take the IPs and shut down anything that's left of BioWare. Now, granted, this is probably never truly going to happen because the name BioWare is an old name and it has value of its own. So they're going to try to corpse puppeteer it as long as possible or sell it to someone else who wants to try and corpse puppeteer it without any of the established IPs. The downfall of BioWare has been truly spectacular and truly, honestly, deserved.
How's it going, everybody? Mr. Holton here, and we just got an absolute bombshell of a revelation about BioWare and their past few years. Yesterday, Jason Schreier of Bloomberg published probably the most detailed report we've seen on what actually went wrong with Dragon Age: The Veilguard. And there is some Mass Effect stuff sprinkled in here too. And surprisingly, it's kind of positive, and we'll get to that later. But after reading through the report, yeah, a lot of stuff starts to make sense. When Veilguard first launched back in November, things didn't really seem too bad at first. After years of delays,
Did they not seem really that bad? Veilguard was effectively a complete disaster day one when people were mocking it for establishing trans identity. Before the game launched, we literally were trying to contain ourselves about how bad this is going to be with their surgery scar character creator. It was never good. It didn't even have a single good day of positive coverage.
and messy development, BioWare finally managed to release the game, and reviews were
I'm sorry. Like, look at this character customization creator. Is this a woman? Is it? Oh no! Either this is a man or they're trying to find a new Zelda lead.
managed to release the game, and reviews were fine, at least on release day.
Classic IGN 9 out of 10 must play. Oh, you know it's a not must play.
Sales on Steam looked pretty solid in those first couple of days, and you could kind of feel like maybe, just maybe they would have.
The sales on Steam were, well, this, honestly, you know what's Dragon Age's biggest claim to fame, honestly, in an almost positive sense? It's the fact that it was the first of the hyper, ridiculously politically infused modern day games of the AAA industry that actually sold a couple of copies. Because keep in mind, after Dragon Age Veilguard and its disastrous launch, because, 85k people playing at peak on Steam is not actually good. It's almost bearable. But this was the best. Every other woke AAA industry plant game that has been released after that has not even gotten half these views. Dragon Age Veilguard was was the first horseman of the apocalypse in its low performance. And keep in mind, this is not good. This was a game that was easily expected to have like a 300k player peak. Easily. It was supposed to sell like, your 5 million copies month one, but now it has maybe sold 1.3 million copies, which is absolutely nothing. We're talking about a franchise that was expected to roughly sell 10 to 15 million copies in 2 years. And that would most likely just be their break-even point. Yes. And these people want you to believe that selling not even 2 million copies is somehow a success. No, these people think that we're stupid. No one is that stupid.
pulled it off, but according to Schreier, the mood inside BioWare shifted pretty fast once players got deeper into the game. That early momentum started fading and word of mouth wasn't great. Some reviews, like that of SkillUps, dropped some crazy bangers like every conversation sounds like Ajar is in the room, and so the fire
Bro.
rapidly started spreading. Now, considering how much pressure was already riding on this project after Andromeda and Anthem, people internally started getting nervous pretty quickly. Then shortly after Christmas, EA made it official. Veilguard had only reached 1.5 million players, which was about half of what they had originally projected.
Players. And this is, by the way, again, we don't know really the sales statistics. I think it's maybe 1.2, 1.3 million at this point. But that's pretty much in 3 years. Where do I see the player sales number? Maybe at 1.6 million. Maybe. It's a disaster. They were giving away free copies day one. Yeah, that's how bad it is.
And this doesn't even provide a sales figure, only the number that it reached. On top of that, their big sports release for the year also underperformed, which only made things worse. EA stock ended up taking an 18% hit basically overnight, and that is pretty big. Now, EA CEO tried to spin it a little, saying that the launch was high quality and those who did play seemed happy, but come on, man, missing.
That's not even true. The EA CEO said that everyone is happy with Dragon Age Veilguard. Players love it, critics adore it, and everyone and your dead grandma should probably get a copy and play it right now. He unironically said that he has not heard anyone say a single bad word about Dragon Age Veilguard. While I, from my perspective, can say, he's probably like the only person that I have heard say good things about Dragon Age Veilguard, and not even about the game.
50% of your sales target is pretty bad, no way how you try to slice it. Now, after the sales miss, things inside BioWare shifted really quickly, and according to Bloomberg, EA didn't waste much time making cuts. Right after lowering their sales forecast, EA laid off a chunk of staff at BioWare's Edmonton office, and a lot of the remaining developers were reassigned to other EA teams. And while considering how long that BioWare and Edmonton has been tied together, this one was pretty bad. This was the studio's home for over 30 years, but now EA isn't even calling it.
Oh no! The poor developers that don't care about making good games hate their audiences and constantly feel the need to talk down on us. Oh no! They got fired? Tell me more. Tell me in detail. I kind of want to hear.
BioWare Edmonton anymore. They've rebranded it into some generic EA hub for staff in the area. At this point, Schreier reports that only a small team remains, just a few dozen people, most of them now working on the next Mass Effect project, which is, well, not news to most of you. But this is really where the bigger questions start to hang over BioWare's future, because as Schreier points out,
by the way, again, I predicted this so long ago, even before the game release, that this is most likely gonna end up with BioWare going bankrupt in some way, shape, or form, sold for parts, completely redesigned, or whatever. Now, again, it's the word BioWare is not gonna disappear. Everyone's gonna try and keep that alive because it has value, as I said previously. But effectively, Dragon Age Veilguard's collapse was the end of BioWare. It was without a mistake from a financial point of view. That end. There was no salvaging this. Because BioWare didn't have a single thing that has sold well, that has performed well in the past years. Sure, they made a lot of money with their previous titles like Mass Effect, but after that, I mean, that money is gonna run out soon, and I mean, it did run out. We knew that this was their Hail Mary.
BioWare has never been one of EA's main moneymakers, which mainly comes from its sports franchises and shooters like FIFA, Madden, and Apex, and even at its peak, BioWare was only contributing about 5% to EA's annual revenue. 5% of their total revenue. So when you add all this up, the sales miss, the layoffs, and EA already moving core people away from the studio, it's not difficult to imagine a situation where BioWare just slowly and quietly fades out of existence. Now, at one point, Schreier's article really starts unpacking why things fell apart, and well, there wasn't just one problem. Actually, it was like a huge chain of cascading events. For starters, there was the obvious stuff. We all remember the weak marketing, then there was the word of mouth that got worse as more people played, and of course the massive 10-year gap since Inquisition. Which, well, that kind of time between releases makes it really tough to keep up the franchise momentum. But the real mess here, at least according to everybody that Schreier has talked to, was how the project kept getting rebooted over and over again. Originally, this was supposed to be a smaller story-driven single
Until they found, obviously, a strong, independent woman to lead the Dragon Age franchise, who was also somehow a man.
player Dragon Age, kind of, going back to BioWare's roots. But then EA stepped in and wanted to turn it into a live service multiplayer game to chase the Destiny model. And after Anthem flopped, they reversed course again, telling the team to switch back to single player. Essentially just turning the entire project into a ping pong match between leadership. But basically, you've got two full pivots during development, you have entire systems.
It's also kind of hilarious how EA is, well, how bad the EA is as a company.
Systems, storylines, and progression all just scrapped and rebuilt multiple times. And every time they changed course, it ate up more budget, more dev time, and made the whole project harder to manage. The completely wild part here is that even after all of this, EA still expected massive sales numbers at launch. Numbers that might not
I mean, why wouldn't they? Are you going to expect something bad? You're a publicly traded company. A line must go up.
have been that realistic in the first place. Now, to really get the full picture, Schreier also goes back to how BioWare even got here in the first place, because you see, back in 2007, EA bought BioWare in a deal worth around $860 million. That's close to $1 billion, and back then,
By the way, that seems so ridiculously cheap, considering even trash like Bethesda was sold for Microsoft for almost $9 billion. Imagine, dude, I would have bought, honestly, BioWare for that little. I mean, like, damn, considering Bethesda costs 9, holy, this is like Discount City.
that was a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but it was way more money back then. And at the time, it actually made a lot of sense, because EA was dominating sports games with FIFA and Madden, but they didn't have much in the way of big single-player RPGs, and that's exactly where BioWare excelled. And for a while, it actually looked like the partnership worked. I remember it like it was yesterday. In 2014, Dragon Age Inquisition dropped and absolutely crushed it, and it won Game of the Year. It sold around 12 million copies, according to Mark Dara, and basically proved that BioWare could still deliver massive hits even under EA. And so you can sort of see how
Yeah, people liked Inquisition. Inquisition was, all in all, kind of really good. I don't know if you can call it super great, but it was really good.
expectations were set high for the next Dragon Age game. Because from EA's point of view, we've seen BioWare do this before, so why not again? But as Schreier points out, Inquisition ended up being kind of the last clean win before things started to fall apart inside the studio. Everything that came after, and
The reason Inquisition was not affected too much by EA, by the way, is very simple. Because when BioWare started making Inquisition, EA didn't have that much say, and EA did not want to start all over again. They just got to finish their project.
Andromeda, Anthem, and eventually Veilguard just ran into more and more complications. Now, let's talk about the shift into live service. This is where things inside BioWare really started going off the rails, and Schreier's reporting makes this part sound like a full-on identity crisis. Because after Inquisition, BioWare moved on to Mass Effect Andromeda, which, as we all know, didn't exactly land. It got
My
mixed
face
reviews,
is
it got
tired.
memed into oblivion, and basically became the studio's first major stumble. Around the same time, EA, like a lot of big publishers, was getting more and more obsessed with live service games. Stuff like Destiny, Overwatch, and Division, games where you keep players hooked for months and years, and constantly spending money instead of just buying a single $60 product. Now that's where Anthem came in. BioWare's big swing at the live service model. And while Anthem was chewing up most of the studio's resources, development on the next Dragon Age got pushed to the side. And this is where Schreier drops one of the wildest stories. In October 2017, Mike Laidlaw, who was leading the next Dragon Age at the time, brought the team into a meeting, pulled out whiskey, and basically told them that EA had officially ordered the game to pivot into full-blown live service multiplayer project. Laidlaw was so against the decision that he ended up resigning from BioWare that same night. Holy
Wow.
shit! He just pulled out the whiskey bottle. It's
Damn, that's cold though.
like from a movie scene. That is insane. But you can also kind of understand why. According to Mark Dara, when EA pushed for live service, their response internally was basically, we don't know how to build this kind of game, but they were told to anyway. That's when development shifted into this new version codenamed Morrison, and the tone shifted too, as Schreier describes it as going for more of a pulpy, light-hearted vibe, which felt like a better fit for multiplayer, but was already pretty far removed from what Dragon Age fans were used to. And so now we're deep into the Morrison phase.
Wait. So, you're telling me someone was smart enough back then to actually figure out that we can't take this gritty, serious fantasy realm and do it into fucking Tinky Winky's Adventure Time, you know, with the Furbies and whatnot. What are they called? Those things? Oh wow, someone actually had foresight there. Jesus.
Dragon Age had officially gone full-on live service. At this point, pretty much everything that defined the older Dragon Age games was getting stripped down or redesigned to fit the multiplayer model. Tactical combat was replaced with pure action gameplay.
Hell
The big
yeah.
one-time story decisions the series was known for was completely gone. Instead, they focused on replayable missions you could run over and over again, either solo
No, not really. They kind of were focusing on pronouns.
or with friends. And because it was multiplayer, a lot of design limitations were baked in. Important characters couldn't die because they had to be around for everybody's persistent world. The narrative couldn't branch out too much because you can't have people in the same co-op missions on completely different story paths. The more they leaned into the live service structure, the harder it became to build anything that even remotely resembled a classic BioWare RPG. Schreier even says that some developers inside the studio started joking that they were basically building Anthem with dragons. Self-awareness, I love it.
Nice.
But if you've played Anthem, you know exactly why that kind of comparison is, well, not great. And the worst part? They already knew Anthem didn't work, but they were stuck building a system that felt like they were walking straight into the same hellfire all over again. As if things weren't bad already, 2020 hits, the pandemic. According to Schreier, development was already in a rough place by this point, but COVID just added another layer of disruption on top of everything else. But the bigger shakeup came after. In December 2020, both Casey Hudson, who had returned as studio head, and Mark Dara, who was still overseeing Dragon Age, ended up leaving the company completely. So now it was completely headless. But then, Gary McKay stepped in as the new studio head, and that's when another massive shift happened. McKay and the remaining leadership finally started asking the question that probably should have been asked way earlier: does this game even play to BioWare's strengths anymore? They were building a live service game when BioWare's entire reputation had been built around single-player narrative RPGs. That's when they made the choice to pivot again.
You serious?
This time fully back to single player, and on paper that sounds like exactly what we had been hoping for. But as Schreier makes it clear in the article, this was not a proper reboot. They didn't get to throw everything out and start fresh. Instead, they had to rebuild a single-player Dragon Age on top of the systems that had originally been built for multiplayer, and EA gave them 18 months to...
You know what's the funniest part about that, honestly? This should not be a problem. I am tired of people trying to use that as some kind of magical catch-22 escape thing. Your multiplayer... Everything that you put in multiplayer except trading can easily be used almost always 1-for-1 for single player. Multiplayer systems are almost all of them the same as single player systems. You got your skill tree, you got your weapons, you got your affixes, you got your items, you got your talents, you got your classes. all of this is a one-to-one. It doesn't matter if it's single player or multiplayer. The main thing that actually changes is, well, kind of fighting in HP pools and whatnot. That changes, yeah, but everything else doesn't matter.
Pull it off. For a huge narrative RPG with world building, storylines, choices, companions, that kind of deadline is, and well, to put it bluntly, fucking insane. You're basically building a full
True.
RPG while dragging around all the old baggage from the live service version that was never really designed for this kind of game. Anyway, now they're locked into single player again. But like Schreier explains, this wasn't some clean reboot where they could sit down.
Also, again, all of this, by the way, sounds bad, but you need to understand that people working at Dragon Age currently and previously while making this are all insane. They're all complete trash. They're all self-righteous, self-centered people who hate us on average. Again, this is how we got the establish your trans identity storyline. Okay, this is why we have a non-binary dragon thing. That's it. This is not the fault of switching back and forth 15 times. This is not the fault of leadership changing. This is not even the fault of EA being EA. This is the fault of, well, the people in the company just in general being retarded at this point. That's it. That's it. Literally, that's it.
Take their time and plan out a proper Dragon Age story. They basically had to Frankenstein everything together.
And they're not even, by the way, good at the things that they wanted to be good at, because keep in mind, we're literally talking about a game that one character needs someone else to talk for them and someone misgenders them or mispronouns them. And then you need to pull a barb. And when that character wants, they can misgender whoever the fuck they want. By the way, I'm not kidding, by the way. This isn't story. If you don't know, the story goes like this. Tosh is non-binary, and when you don't refer to them as they, them, 41% intensifies. And so you need everyone's favorite, my favorite, cum dumpster, Bellara, to constantly remind everyone, don't misgender that. And if you do, it's bad. And then you have a white dude, a necromancer, who does not like when people refer to him as a necromancer because that's not his pronoun. But you see, that doesn't matter. And Tosh constantly makes fun of the fact that that guy wants pronouns because the non-binary dragon creature thingy that's, you know, suicide that has constantly intensifying suicidal ideations is like, I don't care about your pronouns. Pronouns are dumb unless they involve my pronouns. You can't make this up. The game is literally a hypocrisy upon itself constantly. It's ridiculous.
Together with the old parts that they had already built for the multiplayer version. And because of that, almost every decision they made was influenced heavily by time. Schreier says that the dev team kept designing as if the release date was always right around the corner. They'd make compromises just to get systems functional, and then figuring they'd have no time to circle back and refine anything later. But then, like clockwork, the game got delayed. And by that point, they were stuck with a bunch of half-baked design decisions that couldn't be undone anymore. They'd already committed too much development time into things they knew weren't ideal, but they couldn't afford to tear down and rebuild. Now, the biggest victim here was obviously player choice, which, well, is kind of the point of a BioWare game. Schreier points out that because of the game's original multiplayer design, there just wasn't enough room for meaningful choices and consequences. The branching paths, companion decisions, faction politics, that stuff barely made it in.
But I mean, would you want meaningful choice in a joke as big as Dragon Age Veilguard? Probably not, honestly.
If at all, really. Now, Schreier gives one example, because there's a big choice where you decide which of the two cities to save from a dragon attack, but downstream, nothing really changes in the story. I mean, it's technically a choice, but it doesn't have that kind of ripple effect that I would expect from a BioWare game. Like, the game gives you these moments where you think you're making big decisions, but a lot of them, unfortunately, just feel kind of hollow. Like they exist because they had to tick a player choice box. Anyway, at this point, the project was really struggling, and this is where EA decided to bring in backup because they pulled in part of the team working on the next Mass Effect to help get Veilguard over the finish line. And now you might think that this sounds like a good idea, and it kind of was, looking at it retrospectively. It's
No.
all BioWare, right? But inside the studio, this move apparently caused a lot of friction. Schreier explains that the two teams had pretty different work cultures. The Dragon Age team was described more as a pirate ship, creative, sometimes a bit chaotic, figuring things out as they went. Meanwhile, the Mass Effect crew ran more like an USS Enterprise, highly structured, very top-down, and very command-driven. And so when the Mass Effect team came in, they pretty much just took control. Schreier says that they openly criticized a lot of the work that had already been done, started cutting the original Veilguard leads out of meetings, and basically ran things their own way from that point forward.
Actually based. But again, remember, the next Mass Effect is completely cooked. Because the people who were making Veilguard now are in that team. So, I mean, expect the best.
Wow. On one hand, that sounds kind of shitty, but on the other, it actually sounds like it was for the better. Because you see, the funny thing is, some of this takeover actually helped improve on...
I mean, are you kidding me? Have you seen the lead of Dragon Age Veilguard? That creature feature is just... I can't blame them for not wanting to deal with whatever that was.
Dragon Age the Veilguard. Schreier reports that the Mass Effect team helped build new scenes, including the stronger emotional finale that most of us actually liked. And as I mentioned in my review, I think the ending of Dragon Age the Veilguard is probably the best thing about it. It's high tension, it has a lot of action, it has a lot of serious vibes, it's like a complete tonal shift from a lot of the other areas you played through the game. It's very different, but it's also very good in comparison to the rest of the game. But obviously this created even more frustration for the original Dragon Age leads, because for months they had been told that there wasn't enough budget to add scenes like that. But suddenly, once the Mass Effect team was in charge, those same resources somehow became available. And well, to be fair, it's not that hard to see why they got pissed off. Still though, it's hard to say exactly the reason for
Talentless people always get pissed off when someone does even anything remotely better than them.
this. I would imagine that there was a good reason for this, but you never know. Now, one of the stranger issues that popped up toward the end of development was the game's tone, because during the multiplayer phase of development, the game had taken on this very pulpy, quippy tone, the kind of lighthearted and kind of cheeky tone that you'd expect from something like a Marvel film. And that worked okay for a co-op action game where you're just running missions with your buddies. But once the game pivoted back to single player, that writing style started feeling out of place. And by the time Forspoken released and got absolutely roasted online for its awkward banter, BioWare leadership started to panic. According to Schreier, they rushed to rewrite a lot of the dialogue to sound more serious and grounded, trying to bring back the tone into the line with the darker feel we expected. But the problem is, it was way too late in the development to do that properly. Like, voice lines had already been recorded, and scenes were locked in place, and the writers didn't have much room to work with. On top of that, a voice actor strike hit around the same time, which limited their ability to record any new material. So what you ended up with was this very terrible tonal whiplash. Some scenes still had that sarcastic, snarky energy from the earlier drafts, while others suddenly tried to shift into more emotional, serious territory, like in the final part of the game. Like, it didn't feel cohesive. And for a game that's supposed
No one got to the final part of the game. That's the funny part.
to live and die on its storytelling, this type of inconsistency just really stood out. By this point though, it seemed like everyone inside BioWare was just...
And by the way, for those people who are already writing, oh, yeah, Dragon Age actually was very good at the end, shut up, no one cares.
Just running on fumes. The constant pivots, the leadership changes, and impossible deadlines had already taken a toll, and then came another round of layoffs. Schreier says that people were pushed into crunch to hit the release window even though the team clearly knew things weren't in great shape. And then there's the marketing, which honestly might have been one of the worst parts. The first major Veilguard trailer dropped and
What was the marketing? All I remember is like a trailer or two.
yeah, that was everything but great. It's all bright colors, cartoony visuals, weird music.
Oh yeah, well in that case, I mean, do you want to really consider the trailer? Well, the trailers are marketing, I guess, but yeah, everyone was already understanding that the tonal shift of this game was completely uncalled for, and well, remember they were, in essence, they were trying to go for the modern audience. Yeah, that never turns out good, by the way. But they were trying to go for the modern audience. Well, the modern audience doesn't exist. Dragon Age Railguard was an attempt at its core to completely say, "Oh, old audience, who cares about you? You're just what made this game successful and loved in the first place. Who cares about you 15, 20 million people? That's chump change, okay? We're going for the modern audience. We're gonna be the next Fortnite." Well, they didn't say that, but that's probably how stupid they think, if we're being real here. In any case, yeah, it was bad. That was Mr. Holton, 10 out of 10. Bye.